Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out in the meantime. If you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore, I explore the inside and the outside. I got a little distracted there with my mop, and I don't even have a hairband, so I guess I'll have to live with that. I don't even know why I didn't even notice that when I was setting it up, because I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, I'm so warm. And yeah, no wonder with this big mop going on. I'd say give me a second and I would run to go get an elastic band, but yeah, I have to remember just to leave one in my drawer here when it happens. Okay, back to the main branch of the tree. Hi, if you've never met me before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and today I did a little bit. I did a lot of both today, in all honesty. And I have to say, I was very surprised with myself today, because I haven't been super outdoor active lately. For the norm, I've always been somebody who has enjoyed evening walks, and as of late, I've been enjoying the lessons and the content coming across my path. And I do, and I have let things slide. Let things slide so much that I gained 10 pounds. And I'm grateful that as of today, that 10 pounds is gone. But it is in that consistency of getting out there and getting into my walks. I love my walks. Oh my goodness, I went for a walk today in a neighborhood. So beautiful, beautiful yards, big, beautiful houses, people sitting out in their porches. And you have to stop and just compliment and recognize the hard work that people are putting in their yards. And it's for my enjoyment. I feel that way, right? So, out of appreciation for that, if I come across somebody working in the yard or sitting on the porch, I always let them know what a beautiful house, what a beautiful neighborhood, right? And just out of appreciation. But not only that, uh, in the past few weeks, I have been consistently back into my walks. Maybe not every single day, but at the very least, I'm getting out every day. And those big walks I've been doing 3 days a week. This week, I've been back in and walking every single day. That connection to Mother Nature, oh my goodness. I feel what that telluric energy does for me when I am the telluric energy. That's the energy that comes from the ground, that comes from Mother Earth. And it's scientific. It's not anything hooey fooey, and I'm not talking off the top of my head. It's actually people sometimes can actually get enough current from the ground in order to charge a phone. I have seen those videos. I have seen those videos. Let me just click out of my notifications here just so that anybody pops in that, I'm able to interact a little bit. Today I posted some comment on my or content on my community page. It's been a long time. I actually looked, and the last post was to usher in the notice for my Christmas Eve party. I do a Christmas live every year. And I looked and I went, oh my goodness, I really should be more active on my page. And soon as I said that, bang, right? The idea, the breadcrumb, the intuition, came across my path. And in that, I had to munch on that and take it to the table, right? And in practicing in being el natural, genuine, just being myself, not being anybody, that I'm not projecting something more than I am. I just went in and from my heart and from my experience, I expressed myself. Now, in the networks that I run with, you know, some of these ideas I have, I understand they're not always relatable. They're not always relatable. But I believe that my lessons are for everybody. They're non-denominational. It takes all kinds to make the world. It's for the light, it's for the dark, touching the light for the very first time. And it's the light coming out of their darkness, right? And so my content, I believe, is just kind of settling in there with everybody, but because it deals with the two extremes, because that's where I come from in my life, right? I am the light that has touched my darkness, right? And I have been stuck in my darkness for probably up until now, I'd have to say 80% of my life, right? 80% of my life. That's a long time. That's a long time to be stuck in, call it purgatory, because that's what it felt like. It just felt like boredom. It just felt like, well, it didn't feel like boredom, but it didn't feel like where I should be, where I wanted to be. I didn't understand that it was in my choices that, I could search out answers. I was already in, you know, this era of AI learning. I had that ability, I had the possibility. And, I could have made that choice to make that little bit of movement. But for whatever reason, I moved in a different way. No judgment in that. It's better late than never. And I have to say, I have been treading water since, but I'm grateful that, I have better understandings as to how I got stuck, why I got stuck, and how I got stuck, right? And again, it's going to be in my choices whether or not, I don't like to reference this way anymore, to crawl out of that bucket. Because when you crawl out of a bucket, you're usually crawling out on standing on somebody's head, somebody's shoulders, keeping somebody down in order for me or anyone to rise. And that's not the way I want to, I was going to say play this game, but it's not a game. This is for my well being. And I come in and share my well being because I know I made so many mistakes along the way, right? That I allowed myself to be sucked in to something that really I wasn't supposed to be at, right? That I actually absorbed lessons in life that maybe held me down a little, no question, held me down. It's in our own negativity, right? That the best of us doesn't come to the surface. And lots of times we can't help it, right? Because life divvies out, doesn't it, when we're trying to make movement? Life is what happens while we're making other plans. And you know what? When we get ourselves into that state, it's so hard to touch what's good. It's so hard to open ourselves up to something different because no matter what it is, if it's familiar, whether it's uncomfortable or not, if it's familiar, right? We've adjusted to that and we won't make those moves. We won't search out those answers and we won't think that we have anything to offer anybody. And in those kind of feelings, right, that we're not contributing, we're not valuing our own lives, let alone valuing anything about life, that we can be those Debbie Downers, right? We can put ourselves in those depressed and agitated states where, again, the very best of us is just not going to surface because it's uncomfortable. Who wants to hang around that party pooper? Who wants to, right? I'm not going to say who wants to hang around the depressed, right? Because for me personally, I understand that's where the gold is, right? I understand where it's needed the most, and I'm not willing to jump ship for my own benefit. I really am not. Hello, Eugene. I'm doing good. And how are you doing? Oh, and you're doing good tonight, too. Thank you so much for popping into my live. That's why you got that #1 rating there, right? Because it's in the consistency of showing up. And I'm very surprised in actuality because, a month ago I thought I was losing that consistency. But it is in those snowball effects, right? When we kind of sway away, when we do go into those negative states, that we get in that frame of mind where we say, doesn't matter. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow, right? Nobody cares. Woisy me. And again, once that's happened, it probably is best suited that you don't show up. Here on YouTube, you don't see a lot of that bashing of the movement forward. Tonight I actually went in to see a creator who posted recently, and I had not seen him literally uh, make a post of any kind in years. And he posted today, and I thought that was so amazing. And I went in, and it was awesome. He was a singer, right? But then I wonder, was it in that disillusion that, that maybe he decided to take a break? Or was it that he actually just moved on to something new, something more relevant to the person that he is in the moment? Because the person you are in the moment is not the person that you were 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, right? 2 decades ago. And that was something that I was thinking a little bit today, is in that succession of growth. And that's what it is. And I have to appreciate the amount of work and the consistency that I have brought in the past. And we can't always be consistent, even in September. I'm consistent all the time, but when I go on my trips in September, I shut down. Now I'm filming and I'm making content, but I'm not showing up to do any shows because those trips are for me. And I understand even these lessons when I come live every night, first off, those are for me. I come in live to my shows every single live for pretty much. Sometimes I do go into those runs, but as of recently, I learned my lesson because in one afternoon I must have spent 4 hours catching up on missed content because I know those lessons that I put forward, right? I start yapping, I kind of lose myself, but these lessons are for me, #1. And then they go out, right? And sometimes they hit me, right? And I go, "Wow, where did that come from? That is just how come I didn't catch on to it when I was yapping about it?" And then at other times I share it and I go, "Oh my goodness." right? And that happens very rarely, but that usually happens when I come in totally exhausted, on fumes, with a little bit of heaviness, because, I do take in a lot of heavy, we're not going to say dark content, we're going to say heavy content. And it is in that shadow work. I'm putting in that work. I got to understand that, a lot of people, most people, are not doing that, right? So I have to pat myself on my own back in that recognition that, I am taking care of myself to the best of my ability. And that even though the content and the creation of Cindy, because it is a creation, because, I'm learning every day. And every time I learn something, it changes me, right? Not always, right? We have the hobby content, my metal detecting videos, my bottle digging videos, my mother nature documentaries, my history documentaries, right? And that is the passion, that is the hobby. But my truth is in that ketchup that I'm trying to make. And without that signal and without that recognition as to where I am on that measuring tape of being where I need to be, I just keep going. I just keep going. And so I feel bad when I don't come into my own content and take the lesson, because I know foremost that lesson is for me. And you know what? It serves me right. I deserve to sit down for 4 hours and pay attention to myself, right? And I got out of that, but I do have to be consistent. Last night, I was tired after my live show, but did my thumbnail, right? Did my analytical stuff on the live on the podcast. And then I went into the podcast and I got about halfway through before I conked out, and it was really good. Right, I'm not tooting my I guess I am tooting my own horn, but it's not in a egoistic kind of way, because I know deep down, right, that even though I'm partnering with myself, right, a lot of that magic part of it, and I'm not saying technically magic, but I'm talking about the wonder. I'm talking about the goodness and the quality of what I'm trying to bring to the table. Uh, it was something for me, right? And so when I got up this morning, the first thing I did was go in and take in the last half of my lesson, and I'm grateful that I did that, because when you let yourself off the hook, right? I might not have gone back in, and the second half of my podcast impacted me more than the first half of my podcast. So, moving forward, it's important for me to pay attention as to how long my live show is, because I have to take into consideration that I am having to come back in and take that lesson for myself. Now, should I do my live show earlier in the day? Yes, I should. But when I'm not going to say take the lessons, it's when I come in here and present what my lessons serve for me during the day, the longer I can stay in the lessons, the more I have to show, right? The more I have to share, and the more I can be that evidence. And, maybe I'm using that excuse, because I know in the beginning I was procrastinating. I was putting off coming into my lives. I don't feel that way anymore, but I do feel sometimes that, I'm a little bit of a information gobbler. And, the more that I can absorb, and because it's in the same day, it's closest to the present, that it's more still there. You know what I mean? That it's still with me and it's easier for me to share, right? Just like sharing a little bit today about the walk that I had and stopping and talking to people. But you know what? If I had come into my live tomorrow, right? It might not have drawn me into it that way because it would have seemed a little bit irrelevant because I'm already in to my new day. And that's how I felt when I missed my going back in and watching my podcasts, and I let that little stack of 4 or 5 podcasts stack up, and I had to sit in and take those lessons for myself. And I'm not going to say take those lessons again because really, when I go in and watch my lives, where did that come from? And sometimes even I have to do a little bit of research because again it knows bread breadcrumbs, serendipities, those little intuitions I notice and I recognize. Maybe it's just a word, maybe it's a phrase, maybe it's a story or a lesson that I'm just kind of yapping about, that I recognize it's something maybe I have to delve in a little bit deeper. And so I'm really grateful in actuality that I have the understanding that it's important for me not to just take my lessons from others, right? But I have to take the lessons from myself, right? And I believe I do that outside of my podcast, right? In washing dishes and going for a walk, in whatever I'm doing, that I'm spending that time in contemplation, in reflection with myself, because I am partnering with myself. And it's important that I own up to the person that I'd like to become. And I know I can only become that when I find the true source. And that true source has to be myself. It just has to be. Eugene, thank you so much for coming in my live tonight. Everybody else, I hope you had an amazing week. Like I said, I posted on my community channel today. If you wanted to go in, I was posting a little bit on kindnesses, a little bit unkindnesses, the two extremes, right? And the lessons in what we pick up along the way in our lives and how it can change us or how it can put us in the wrong directions or the right directions, and how by again our own choices that we can pick up some lessons along the way and have better insights, better truths, right? It is in that admittance that none of us has the answers. And it's in the willingness, and this is a little bit what I was talking tonight, that willingness to be course corrected in our understandings, right? I am willing, right? I'm not looking forward to the course corrections, but I'm willing because for me, what's most important is getting it right because I do serve what I learn. I do serve what I resonate with, right? And I do have perceptions that have taken me years to hold as my own, right? Lots of times they were just perceptions, right? And not perspectives. Perceptions is in the process of learning, right? It's not the end game. It is not the perception, right? It is in the learning and being open in that course correction that we have the opportunity to get things right just as much as we get things wrong. And that's a truth too. And I've gotten some doozies wrong in my life. I have to tell you, in honest truth, one of the biggest ones I ever did was labeling my mother a narcissist, right? And I don't know, in finding out the truth in her actual personality, and those took lessons, but I could have stopped at narcissist. And in every conversation I ever had, that would have been the label that she would have worn. In actuality, she had her own experiences. And I understand now a little bit more about personality disorders, right? And personality traits, and the synthesis of how we could be an accumulation of a few or all. And that's a truth too. I am very empathic. I am. But I understand also that I am very controlling. And so I have to appreciate that I needed to be course corrected and understand that, my mother was also controlling and not narcissistic, but she was not an empath. She was a borderline. But borderline lines feel their way around too, but they're just not able to control their emotions the same way as empaths do. It's not like they don't suffer, right? Empaths suffer, but in the lessons of being an empath, we learn to hold things to ourselves, right? Not to draw attention to ourselves, right? Good or bad, whether we're throwing a fit or we're approaching in looking to belong, that we have ways that we have control over ourselves. And, my mother didn't have that control. And that's one thing narcissists do have. They are very controlling. They're harder on themselves than they are on others. And, oh, I feel bad. And, if I had that opportunity to receive some forgiveness in that misjudgment, because that's what it wasn't intentional. And I have to say that it could have been deserving uh, to the people who follow my content, because in talking about my mother as a narcissist, they would have recognized in some of those traits, and they might have mislabeled themselves, and I might have sent people down the wrong path in that. So I'm grateful for the course correction, and I'm grateful that I am willing to be course corrected in my misunderstandings, my misjudgments, my own searching out and relating and taking on truths that were actually untruths. It's very important for me not to just be genuine when I'm showing up, but because I'm moving forward, I want anybody who is following my content, right, Eugene, to move forward also, right? We do this in baby steps, and I get it, right? A lot of the stuff I yip yap about, right, is probably not always gotten, right? It's not always understood. And in that partnership with myself, I'm trusting that Cindy, myself, that in that partnership that we could work as a team, that if you don't get me today, then because you like me, because you trust me, because you understand that I'm genuine, because you can see that I'm trying, that you might give me another shot tomorrow, right? And that's how come I come in and I watch my own lives, right? My podcast is very important to me for myself, right? It's just not for the people who come in and follow my content. It is for me. I'm bumbling along just like everybody else, but in taking my own lessons and coming into my lives, I can see the progress. I can see the getting it right. And I notice when I get it wrong. And I notice that getting it wrong is not as often as it used to be. That I'm feeling myself along a lot better than I was. And that's the truth. Okay, we're going to try and keep this a little bit shorter because I am coming in live before I go back in and I'm taking my own lesson for myself. But let's grab a card tonight, one card. We're just going to go into it. If you've never hung out with me before, I have a deck here. It's 54 powerful words, just powerful words. And I practice the lessons for myself with these powerful words. And it's not the same lesson every time, not for myself and not for what I bring to my content. And that's the truth. And I'm so appreciative that in those intuitions, those breadcrumbs, those serendipities, right? Those great ideas, that I had the idea to do this deck, right? It's not tarot cards, but you know what? The tarot ladies and the tarot gentlemen, they inspired me, right? They inspired me in the content that they bring across because I understand that lots of times that the tarot readers are reading in to their cards with a message that is also correct. And I would be super pleased if they came into their own content knowing, right, that there was a lesson in that, not just for their audience, but for themselves also, right? Understanding not everybody, right? Not everybody is doing that, right? And that's determination, that's consistency, right? That deserves a pat in the back, and that's the truth. Okay, you guys, one card, few minutes, first impression, maybe a perspective. But here we go. Here it is. Oh my goodness. I talked about this today. Well, I didn't talk about it, but I posted about it in my community channel. We talked about a little bit about the courage, right? And what did I write? Courage is trusting yourself more than the doubt in the moment. Wow. That that is hitting home and the perfect message for me today because as I move forward, the lessons are heavier, aren't they? And I understand as the lessons become heavier that they might not touch the same, right? They're still going to touch, but sometimes that touch is a little bit of, right? Right? And we talked about that a little bit today, too, in those kindnesses to ourselves. And we can be courageous and kind. And we can expect and anticipate that that kindness will still be there for us, will still be directed at us if we could drum up the courage to stand and present and show up in our own genuineness and our own understandings, knowing they are our own understandings. I take in a lot of content. I receive lessons from so many great creators and thought leadership out there, so many people who have moved me along. And because I allowed myself to be drawn into that, but it was in my own resonating that I took it on as a truth, a perspective, right? Lots of this is just perception. It's the learning process. It's maybe I'll resonate with it, maybe I won't, right? But once it does become a truth for me, that is Cindy's perspective, right? And that's hard. That's hard. There are perspectives. There are many perspectives. In the moment, the idea, the intuition, the breadcrumb to bring it to the table, it doesn't fly. It doesn't serve. It doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve on my brand. But that doesn't mean that it never will. Sometimes it's in the courage. Sometimes it's in the perfect timing. Sometimes it's in the next lesson that is needed, right? Part of that prerequisite of what we want to bring to the table, that in order to get it down packed, right, we have to get it down packed first. Once we do that, we come to the table, it's something new, it's something that we could have that experience of ouchie, that experience and that fear and that freeze and that procrastination not to go into the podcast myself, to the content myself, and take that lesson for myself, knowing that, oh, right, right, that Cindy is moving forward. But in those baby steps, I want to move forward in a way that I'm just naturally walking into it, that it feels like a comfortable conversation like it does now, right? And that only comes with, well, the consistency, in the willingness to show up, the willingness to be course corrected, right? The willingness, right, to get it wrong, right? To get it wrong. Because if you don't get things wrong, it's just like if you don't tell somebody that you have a problem or you don't reveal what you're thinking. How's anybody going to know? How's anybody going to know? Because it's when others know that those lessons and those experiences and those conversations could be had. And then maybe we don't flubber, right? Maybe we don't trip over ourselves. Maybe we don't freeze. Maybe that one lesson that we've been storing on a shelf because it's too big, it's too scary. Somebody's going to yell at me. Somebody's not going to like it. Maybe that's the most important lesson. And if I could drum up the courage, if anybody could drum up the courage, maybe we could truly bring the most important lessons to the table. And that's what I was thinking about tonight when I was writing my community post. And if you want to go check it out, I would appreciate it. I would love your thoughts on it. Just go to my main YouTube page, it's in the community post there, and you can check it out. And yeah, give me some feedback. I want that feedback. That's always how we get better, right? And yeah, I think that's all I've got for you tonight, you guys. Courage. Courage is trusting yourself more than the doubt in the moment. Wow, that was a good card to pull today. We talked about that. I was in it in my contemplation. I thought to myself, how am I ever going to do that? Right? Well, I'm going to do that. It's just drumming up that courage, a little bit of bravery, right? Never hurt anybody. It really didn't. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Night, Eugene. Thank you for popping in. And for those of you who pop in later, whether it's in the morning and you're getting your day off to an amazing start, right? I hope it ends just as amazing. You guys,